Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is May, and we're talking about the week of May 13th through the 19th. So I'm going to break the fourth wall, Zoe.
Yeah. Okay.
Today that we're recording, so I'm breaking the fourth wall, we're recording this during the new moon in Taurus. So the experience I'm having in my body as I record today's podcast is the new moon that sets up the new lunar cycle that we are in, that we are describing as if it was actually May 13th when it's not. So the reason I'm breaking the fourth wall and not just pretending that, that it's just the 13th and I know what's going on is that it's a slim week. The planets are very quiet. We are in... Well, actually, the planets are doing some yummy stuff from like midweek to Sunday that's energetically positive. And we've been through so much crazy energy the last two lunar cycles that I want to sit here and say to y'all, isn't it better? Isn't it gentler? Isn't it less intense? And the fact is, because we ain't there yet, I don't know if that's going to be the case. From a real bona fide way that I like, when I'm speaking about the astrology as it's happening in my daily videos or my daily writing, it's a very different experience than sometimes coming onto the podcast. So here's the deal, kids. It's a new lunar cycle that we're in. This is the second week of that cycle. It is a gentler energy all month long, or this entire lunar cycle. It's a quiet week, and therefore it should be a quieter sort of passage for us. And after the craziness of, March and April, I think that we could, we need the rest, we need the grounding, we need the slower pace. And I'm going to trust that that's part of what's happening this week.
That's balance, baby.
There you go. Balance.
Yeah.
So we have a question, as we do every week, and this one is from Pantangible. I'm assuming that's a bit of a made-up name, but it's fabulous. Pantangible writes, in parentheses, she writes, this may be too much like, I love this, inside baseball, but you do refer to the geometry of astrology, so maybe the question will appeal. My father, who learned astrology by a mail-order course from the Rosicrucians and constructed charts the old-fashioned way pre-computer, told me that the actual moment any aspect peaks is 13 minutes earlier than Pacific time based on how far we lived from the geographical line where Pacific time begins. This made sense to me.
Very specific.
Right.
We are nerding out here.
Right, no, totally. This made sense to me, and I have accidentally missed some eclipse totality viewing, which I blame on this discrepancy. However, she writes in all caps, I have never heard another astrologer mention it ever, and then she says ever a second time with all caps.
Okay.
Is there concern among astrologers about overcomplicating the already complex subject? Or is this variation in exactitude not really a thing? Wow. Fabulous, nerdy question. So
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why you've never heard any astrologers talk about this is that, you really are in some nerdy, like left brain, like how far can we take the details?
Yeah.
So time is a factor in astrology. In fact, astrology and time are kind of intrinsically bound together. The movement of the planets is also time unfolding. And so, yes, if you live in an area of geography that we call 2 o'clock, but that area of geography is wider than the time it would take for the sun to move however far it moves in 1 hour, if that Pacific time longitudinal line is, X number of miles east or west of where you live, then yes, the exactitude of the transit hitting will impact. It sounds like her father understood that where they lived in the Pacific time zone would take 13 minutes of time to match up. So it's like she says, this feels intuitive to me, and I will agree. It makes sense that you could divide time down into smaller segments based on the geography of where you live in relationship to the longitudinal line of that time zone. But oh my God, I've just had an aneurysm describing that.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I was mentoring two different people in astrology, and it was really interesting to sort of sit with one who was, very archetypal and feminine in their thinking and approached astrology in that way. And then the other person I sat with was a real astrology nerd. And this guy loved to trip off on things like this. So I guess my ultimate answer is some astrologers would not be concerned about this, what you're calling overcomplication, because that's what they love doing. And so have at it.
Right.
So at the end of the day, the question gets answered more from the perspective of how are you using astrology? What's the value you get out of it? And what do you want the use of astrology to offer you?
Mm-hmm.
And so from the perspective of how I use astrology, which is to contextualize my emotional psychic experience, to understand why certain moments feel a certain way so that I don't think I'm crazy and I can work with the energy more directly. So therefore, this 13-minute distinction would not be interesting to me in the way that I use and teach astrology. But it doesn't mean that it's not a fascinating way to use astrology. My question would be, okay, well, what's the value of that? What are you going to do with that information that the exact moment of a lunar aspect hitting is 13 minutes different than you think? That might set you up to do some interesting empirical, anecdotal studies of your own to say, well, do I feel it differently 13 minutes, so I can see that being interesting, but the value of how I use astrology would make that unimportant. But listen, have at it, kids. There's lots of yummy, nerdy, endless astrology considerations to fall down the rabbit hole with, and this might be one of those. So there's not a lot to talk about this week in terms of what I typically cover in this podcast, which is always the big energies. And certainly the last 2 months, there have been so many big, juicy energies each week. There's been lots of deep stuff to talk about. And this just is not the case this week. One of the things we are moving through is the first quarter moon. So we will talk about what that is and how to sort of, understand it. Part of why today feels slim, Zoe, I think, is just the fact that there isn't a new moon or a full moon to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? So we're sort of in between that. But the first quarter moon is something to recognize. This is what we're moving through on Wednesday. It's one of the major pillars of every lunar cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives me a good sort of opportunity to teach about that if you're newish to astrology. At the new moon, when the sun and the moon are together, we set intentions for the lunar cycle ahead and just, what the archetype of where the sun and the moon are, we dial in again, this is the Taurus mansion. So we dial back in to setting intentions for our cash and prizes desires, all of the rewards we want life to bring us. This is, the manifestation lunar cycle. That's what they say about Taurus, and that is accurate and true. And a week ago Wednesday, we had that new moon that allowed us to start up in a new way. Now, if you go out into your garden and you plant a bunch of seeds and you water them every day, 7 days later, those seeds are cracking open. That's a crisis. If you think of what the seed, not the planter, but the seed is going, oh, I'm cracking open. And some of those seeds will thrive and some of them will fail. And this is actually, I'm speaking literally of seeds in the ground. It's a metaphor, a symbol for our desires and the intentions we set a week after that new moon, when the conscious awareness of the sun and the unconscious impulses of the moon are sort of in the same place, and therefore we are aligned. Our conscious awareness and our unconscious is aligned, which is the perfect time to set intentions, because the unconscious is where the fertilizer is and the water is, and the thriving comes because the unconscious says yes.
Mm.
Well, at the 90-degree moment, the first quarter moon, the moon is moved 90 degrees. Now, conscious awareness and unconscious impulses are not together in the same place. They are not harmonizing with each other. They are at odds because they're in this 90-degree angle of conflict and obstacle. So the conscious awareness says, I want the things I intended. And the unconscious mind is saying, well, maybe, maybe not. And so from an archetypal perspective, we think of the first quarter moon as the crisis of some things we desire will have to be let go of because it's just not for us. And some will thrive. We want to focus on that. And the energy of Wednesday might include the idea of being in some minor stress because the sun and the moon are at odds with each other. And when they are at odds up there, down here in our bodies, our conscious awareness and unconscious impulses are rubbing each other the wrong way. So there might be a little bit of stress on Wednesday just because it's the first quarter moon. And if anything shows up on Wednesday as a negation or a no or an ending, respect it. It's just the seed in the ground saying, not this time around. Now, the first quarter moon on Wednesday notwithstanding, there's actually something really, really yummy about this week. And it's a series of transits that play out between Wednesday and Sunday that to me is like the promise of the cash and prizes that Taurus can bring. If there's going to be some cash and prizes in this immediate lunar cycle, it's going to be this week. So one of the ways that March and April were so challenging was all of the big energy, right? Eclipses, Mercury retrogrades, some other crashing transits that occurred. And all of that's in our rearview mirror at this point, right? So we're for sure in a whole other landscape. And I will say this week has a handful of really positive, powerful transits that are, I think, in the realm of the cash and prizes lunar cycle that I sort of talked about in the new moon. I called this the cash and prizes new moon, right? So the whole cycle of the Taurus new moon is about expansion and abundance and prosperity and our relationship to it. So it's lovely that this is a lunar cycle where really bumpy shit is behind us and we're not bringing on any new really difficult stuff. And here we are in this second week in May, and there's some lovely energy that we're working with. So I'm just going to sort of carry you through a kind of day-to-day overview of some of these lovely energies. And it literally starts today. Today, the 13th of May, you've got the Sun and Uranus in a conjunction, while Venus is holding a sextile with Saturn. We call Uranus the Great Awakener because anytime Uranus transits are in our experience, we are waking up. We are up-leveling to a higher perspective. And if the sun is involved in any transit, then we call that a solar transit. Solar transits are about awareness, conscious awareness. Uranus upgrades our conscious awareness. Uranus upgrades our conscious awareness with every transit he makes. This is what we mean by the Great Awakener. His job is to awaken us to higher levels of conscious awareness. And so once a year, the sun and Uranus come together, and we experience that as a kind of opportunity to wake up to a higher level of awareness, we feel more progressive, risk-taking, inventive. We're ready to move in a brand new way, excited by what's possible. Then, meanwhile, over on the other sort of side of the cosmos, Venus sextiling Saturn allows our emotional body to be grounded, stable, moving slower in order to understand what our emotional responses are at any given moment. And so it's a beautiful combo to have our emotional body kind of grounded and stable and not in a reactive place, while our conscious awareness is being treated to a notion of what's possible. Let's try some new things. Thursday and Friday of the week, those are the hard days. That's when Mercury is going to square Pluto and semi-square Saturn at the same time. Mercury square Pluto is power struggles like on crack. Fortunately, Mercury is out of his shadow. This was not part of his last retrograde, so we're not having power struggles that we have to pay attention to the past. But understand that as we move through this week, you can bet that if there are going to be some difficulties, they're going to happen Thursday, Friday, when the planet of perception and communication says we're struggling with power. And we've got some minor lessons. Semi-square from Mercury to Saturn just means that our thinking is narrow and focused and limited. There might be delays and breakdowns that are, bothersome. And so just watch out for the Thursday and Friday energy. It's the roughest 2 days of the week. And then we come to the weekend. Oh, my Lord. Saturday has the sun conjunct Jupiter. That's like confidence and optimism on crack. It's our conscious awareness aligning with the planet that brings all possibility. And in the sign of Taurus, we're really talking about cash and prizes. So the fact that in this lunar cycle, having just come out of a moment last lunar cycle when Jupiter and Uranus came together by conjunction, helping us align and integrate our ideas of possibility and expansion, Jupiter, and the changes that might need to take place to create and receive such bounty, that's Uranus. So those two energies that met up a couple of weeks ago changed us from a perspective of how we relate to possibility and the changes needed. So with the sun conjuncting with Jupiter on Saturday and Uranus earlier in the week, this is the week our conscious awareness catches up to what the last lunar cycle installed into us, which is a greater capacity to believe in the possibility of the desires that we wish to expand into. This is why the pop astrologers were talking so much about, oh my God, you're going to manifest everything. Which we know is bullshit, but to the extent that you as an individual are ready to have a great, rich expansion into more, this is that month and this is that week. Back to Saturday and Sunday. I got distracted there. So the sun and Jupiter by conjunction on Saturday is just gorgeously confident, optimism, and expansive in our sense of perception. Solar transits bring that. And Venus and Uranus conjunct that day, which means we're excited about love and the heart and possibility and money, by the way. Venus rules money. So Venus in Taurus is like literally giving us access to the cash and prizes. And this is that moment where the power of Venus to reflect our finances comes into full flagrante. At the new moon in Taurus, Venus was in Taurus then, but she was at 10 degrees. She was far away from the lunation, kind of on the outside of the event, but close by. So what's happening this weekend, by virtue of her moving further and conjuncting with Uranus on Saturday, the excitement of what's possible and the capacity to bring sudden unexpected income gets grounded in as we move through the weekend. Then on Sunday, the Sun and Neptune will form a sextile, which means our conscious awareness is tapping directly and powerfully into spirit, Neptune, in productive geometry that allows us to use our conscious awareness of what we desire and the power of co-creation with spirit to help create it. And then Mars in the north node of the moon conjunct on Sunday, which means we're also sharing all of these consciousnesses with others. Mars in the north node means an active day of connection and busyness and interactions with groups and others in a manner that is cooperative and constructive and abundant with energy. So the whole Saturday and Sunday is like a masterclass in manifestation possibility, feeling confident, optimistic, and hopeful. And I'll sort of put it this way as a wrap up. And I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I think it bears repeating. This is the cash and prizes lunar cycle. This is a time of manifestation power accelerated to a fabulous level. This is the weekend that we're talking about at the end of the week of that idea being sort of brought forth into our conscious awareness fully. Now, the extent to which you listeners are going to be like winning the lottery as a result of all of this is dependent upon your life, your narrative, what you're up to, where you're at in your healing journey, how much bounty and abundance and prosperity that you feel deserving of in your heart. All of this Taurus energy can bring it to you, but if you don't feel deserving in the heart to keep it, you won't be able to keep it. So we got to make sure that we're not falling prey to the pop astrologer's promise that you can have anything you want. Be sure to keep doing the shadow work so that you know how you are resistant to all of the things that you want, and then trust the Taurus archetype as it lives in you to be deeply lit up as we move through the month of May, increasing all of our capacities to receive and hold more abundance than ever before. Have at it, kids.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email and dream, and I picked it because there's a kind of physicality to it that I have been feeling in a couple of my dreams this week.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. So Devin says, "Hi, Michael. First, I just want to say I listen to the podcast every week, and I want to thank you for creating it because it's helped me learn so much.
Yay.
I'm writing about a dream that I had on the morning of the Capricorn moon. I am a very spiritual person and am connected to the universe, but I've never had a dream like this before. The dream started when I was in this random house that seemed familiar, which happens a lot in my dreams, with a bunch of friends and people I know. There was a guy who I was also seeing and have stayed close friends with / have a complicated relationship with, who was also there. We were all talking, and then I decided to wander into an empty hallway and go into a room to take a nap. I then am lying on the edge of this bed in the room in a straight line facing the left wall, and my back facing the right. The room is unfamiliar, but has her bed in it. And I hear the guy who I have a thing with come into this room after me, and he's saying my name. He then comes to stand behind me and starts tapping me to wake up. This is where it gets weird. I actually felt like someone was tapping my shoulder and could feel his energy right next to me. He then keeps tapping me and saying my name, followed by "wake up." And when I don't, he bends down to kiss my face, and it really actually felt like he was kissing me. Then I could hear his footsteps leave the room. I don't remember anything that happened after that, but remember, as soon as I woke up, I could still feel his very present energy with me. I was so confused because it actually had felt like being with him in real life,
Yeah, I'll bet.
and I was kind of thrown off as to what happened. I don't know if I astral projected or what happened, but I would love your interpretation on this. So,
Wow.
she goes on to say the guy who's in the dream is someone she immediately had a spiritual connection with in real life when
That's good to know. Got it. That's
when
actually
they
really
first met.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, and they went out for almost a month, and then that spiritual connection stopped. And so they still have a flirty friendship. And so that's all the context
I like that you
that
offered
she
that
adds.
context, though, because one of the things that sort of does for me is because there was this immediate recognition in waking life,
Mhm.
then that makes me veer away from feeling his presence in the dream as being a romantic impulse.
Interesting.
Well, let me inch my way through the dream images and sort of
Yeah.
tell you why I get there and how it occurs for me. First of all, we're in a random house that's familiar, right? So that means that we're in a consideration of self.
Mhm.
And so the bunch of friends and the people there, it's like just a setting of Devin in consideration of her sense of self at the time of this dream. And then it becomes important to have in this landscape the idea of what this man represents.
Mhm.
Now I know that outside of the fact that they dated for a month, which I'm going to assume means that they met, then they had sex for a month, and then they stopped having sex, and now they're still connected, right?
Right. They're like, meh, wasn't it?
Right. So then if he's there in the top of the dream, and the dream is about Devin's current sense of self, and he's there, that means that her spiritual wokeness is in some consideration in this dream, right? Because now we have this added information that in waking life, this man reminded her of her spiritual sensibility because they shared it. When I was writing the notes, as you were reading the dream, I wrote the word hallway in all caps
Hmm.
because hallways are a very specific room in a house, and each room has a meaning, and the hallway says transition. Something's changing, or something's being considered about an in-between liminal space. That's what hallways are, neither here nor there. So something has to happen of importance if it starts with a hallway, because the psyche is saying you're in between a state. And so therefore something of the change needs to be attended to. Hallway. So this is interesting. She goes into the hallway to take a nap. Now, on the one hand, I could call that a symbol of restoration or a moment where her psyche is expressing the self-care need of she responds to rest when her body says to take a nap. Except that it's her bed, so it's very much a connection to her sleepiness. And
Yeah,
the
I thought that
whole
was
rest of the
interesting.
dream is about wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Yeah.
This guy's trying to wake her up. So if that's true in the dream, if that's what the clear sort of essence of the tap, 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 wake, 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 your name is, then when I hear after you read the dream that, oh, this guy had an immediate spiritual spark for Devin, that's why I go to this part of the dream and say, he's not acting as the prince trying to wake up Cinderella so that they can, not Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, so that they can live happily ever after. I think he's showing up as the part of her that recognizes spiritual mojo out in the world, is in her dream space saying, wake up, wake up, wake up to a higher level of consciousness, wake up to more love. He kisses her face. What an intimate act. Kissing of a face is a bit of an initiation act. A parent kissing a child in that way. The Good Witch of the North kissing Dorothy on the forehead before she goes off to her little adventure. So the kissing of the face to me reads like a deep initiation from spirit, not a romantic kiss from this man. So to me, the dream is about the next level of Devon's spiritual awakening is at hand. And there's a part of her that's right there saying, this is it. Wake up. Here's your name. I say your name, which means you know your sacred identity. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And then there's the kiss that says, if you wake up, there will be a blessing. And that blessing was strong enough in the dream space that it physically followed her into waking space. It's interesting to me that when she goes into the bed, she makes an emphasis on lying in a straight line. Was it facing left or the wall? Read that part of the dream thing.
Sure.
In case there's something juicy there we need to pay attention.
Yeah, I didn't know if this was too much detail for you, but...
Well, it may or may not be. Let's hear it. Before you even say it, Zoe, just from my memory of having heard the dream once, the way she's lying in the bed to me suggests a process is happening. It's not, again, a random nap. She did not go into that room to take a nap because she needs some sleep. She went into the room because she's in a hallway of her consciousness. She's in transition. What's the end game? A higher level of consciousness that she's in the process of waking up to. So the lying on the bed in that particular fashion reminds me of ritual. It reminds me that when you were reading that, I was thinking about how often when I'm doing certain ritual, I make sure to line up, get out the compass and line up east and west and orient myself towards east and west when I'm in ritual. That's what that moment in the dream reminded me of. But my notes are very confusing. So what did she say? Read those words again, just in case there's a detail that might be helpful.
Yeah, so she says, I then am lying on the edge of this bed in a room, in a straight line facing the left wall, and my back facing the right.
Okay, so edge of the bed strikes me as, again, it's not about rest. Right? The fact that her back is to the right and she's facing a left wall, which means she's in consideration of her being nature, not her doing nature. She's facing left. So she's looking at her stillness, her feminine, her being nature, as opposed to the right side of the doing nature. So again, all of these little sort of details in the dream to me point to a process of transition that she's in, an awakening that's ready to happen. The physicality of it following her into waking life could mean that there was physically a connection to a guidance energy that's kissing her and waking her up that isn't this man, but that her personal psyche transformed this energy into him as an image, but that the energy that's kissing her and waking her up is part of her guidance system that's saying, face the feminine, be more in the being than the doing, and wake up to a higher level of conscious awareness. And the physical sensation being so visceral is because those 5-dimensional or 4-dimensional, whatever other dimensional aspects of us has structure.
Yeah,
we think of it as airy-fairy and loosey-goosey and like amorphous. But there is structure up there in that dimension. And so
Yeah.
there is the capacity for things that happen in the world of phenomena to hit us in the world of 3D form. And so
Yeah.
the physical sensation following her out of the dream is because it was bigger than just a random firing nerve image in her brain that created a visual. Something happened, honey. And what happened is you're being initiated to waking up to a higher level. So have at it.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.